Okay, I'm assuming that must be better, that people can hear me now, I'm hoping. I apologize for that. Give me 1 second here. Great, thank you everybody. I apologize, I put myself on mute twice. So going back really quickly, you can see the agenda up there on the screen. By now you've seen my contact information. You've heard my wonderful voice a couple times now. We're going to cover creating the reports. This is our schedule. For the Power Hour schedule, in 2 weeks we have November 20th, which we're going to be covering dashboards. Dashboards, using them is not part of the standard license for Aeros Vision. That is an add-on functionality. So if that's something you do not have, then you can reach out to me and I can put you in contact with Ben Silva that will give you the licensing information on actually the license to create dashboards. It's a great functionality that is extra on top of the actual Vision, as initially when Vision was released it didn't have it, and that was a new feature we added over the last couple months. The December 4th, Groovy Grids, if you have access to Vision, you will have access to Groovy Grids, and that is expanding in much more detail on what we covered 2 weeks ago in the quick queries. It's really putting some more power just behind the grids themselves. And then December 18th, our final wrap-up session was showing you the Aeros Vision for the web function. So let's get started. So I'm in Aeros Vision, and just to give a quick recap from last week, I'm going to come over here and look at the query that we created 2 weeks ago. This query we created 2 weeks ago was to give us a list of our different invoices. Some sample information here. My system wants to respond to me. That we wrote a query that was give us all the customers where a specific customer number and their balance of their invoices is not equal to 0. Some of the data that we're returning, here's the invoice number, the invoice date, the amount, the balance, the due date, their customer number and name, and then the accounting period that was put into. Now this is what we created 2 weeks ago. I'm not going to go into how I created this again. We can watch the nifty little videos if you want to see how we did that. Today we're going to take that to the next level by actually creating a printable report through that. When I say printable, within the system here, in the actual queries, if you don't recall, one of the things you can do on the queries is you can hit the print button right up here in the very top left-hand corner. Now, what the system does in this situation is it just gets the grid and kind of just drops it in its best case scenario that you can do with it, with what the system can do dynamically. It creates the column headings exactly as they are up here, and it puts the information displayed on the screen, and it tries to fit them as much as they can. Now, you can come back over here and you can rearrange your columns. You can do different groupings by customers if you wanted to group it by customer. Now, if I hit the print button, it takes that into account, so it's now grouped it by customer. And we see the different columns are in new order. This is great at situations where you don't really need to do very heavy report writing. This layout here works perfect. You can do everything that you need to with it. That's all that you really need to. But if we want to take it to the next step where we want to do much more formatting on the due dates, we want to do different criteria and different levels of grouping and subtotaling, that's where we actually want to get to writing a report, an actual printed piece of paper that we're going to create, or exporting the PDF or whatnot. So in order to do that, I hit this new report button right here. When this comes up, it's going to ask me what query I want to use. Now you can see the list of queries that I have right here are the same exact listing of queries that I have over here. So your query is your base. That's what you need to write first to make sure that your raw data is actually correct. Then after you made sure that is done and good, we come over here and tell it what query we want to use. So I'm going to use this demo invoices query that I did right here. So I'm going to click OK. Now it wants to run that query. What data do you want to use to actually design this report? So I have this customer number is equal to 10100 here. giving me my invoice balances. Same exact thing if I actually ran the query over there. For the sake of designing this report, I want to get more information because I want to do some more grouping and categorization, so I just don't want to limit it down to the customer number is equal to that, so I'm going to uncheck that. I'm going to click the OK button. Now it's going to run that query just like we did over here, but it's going to give me a whole bunch more different data now than just that one individual customer. So when the report comes up, when I'm creating a new report, what I get is a blank, basically a blank slate. All that I have here is the heading of that query. It automatically dropped that in here as the report title. And then down here in the footer, it dropped in the current date and time and then the page number. Now the information down here is dynamic. The system will automatically update that for you when you actually go to print that. On the actual report layout here, we have what we call these different bands. These different bands is a page header. And it says this is the information that's always going to print on the header of every page. This is a detail band. What are the actual details that we will print out of it? And you'll see here in a little bit, this is where we actually go to lay out the different pieces of the report. And then this is the page footer information that will force it to print at the very bottom of every page. I'll show you how later we'll create different bands to do different things for a subtotal or a grouping band. The first thing I'm going to show you with this here is how to actually use what is called the report wizard. And what I do to get to the report wizard, it's a way for me or for the system to generate a report for you where you don't have to actually configure the different fields. So I'm going to hit this little tick mark guy in the upper left-hand corner right here. I'm going to click this, and the option I have at the very top of here is Design in Report Wizard. So I'm going to click that. And what I get here is this first step of the wizard. It says, what type of report do you want? Do you want a standard report or do you want a label report? If you're going to print labels, the system, if you have all that information in your data set and you want to print to a standard every label for addresses, information, or you name whatever you want, use that label report. For today, I'll start with the standard report. Now it's asking me through this wizard, what columns do you want to display in your report? Well, I want to display the name of the customer, their invoice number, their invoice date, and what the balance of that invoice is. So you can pick as many different fields that you want to display on that report. I can either double click on them and that moves them over, or I can use one of these buttons over here to move it left or right if I realize that's not one that I want to. Now you can go through this report wizard multiple times if you need to. It'll just update and override it every time you run through it. Now it's asking if I want to add any grouping levels. So yeah, I want to group it by customer. So I can come here. Actually, it's going to group it automatically by the customer number, the invoice number, the date, and the balance. You can have several groups, each with a single field or specifying several fields in the same group. So right now I'm just going to group by that, and we'll see what we get. Now we have options here. How would you like to lay out your report? You can see here I'm in this columnar format. I can hit columnar, tabular, or justified. It creates different fields or different layouts of that data. So if that data wraps onto multiple lines, it creates this different justified layout. Tabular creates these nice pretty little grids, kind of just like as we saw with the query report, and the columnar does a little different formatting there. We'll see how that looks. We'll go through the wizard a couple different times so you can see the different outputs of that. Then you have the orientation. Do you want this in portrait or do you want it on landscape? This checkbox down here, adjust the field width so all fields fit on a page. What it will do in that situation is if you have some text fields that are really long, it's going to squeeze them into the 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. If I uncheck this, it's going to have it run over to the margin, and then you have to do some playing around with things to make it fit right. Hitting the next button. We have these 5 different styles of the reports that are canned into the system. You can see if you want like a formal looking report or a corporate, a casual, compact, or bold. It's just setting your default font and colors and styles on that. I'll just pick casual to go start with. What do you want to title the report? I'll give it a name there, and I'll click Finish. So now what it's going to do, it got rid of all that previous information that I had and put everything in here into this format. So now if I come over here and hit the Print Preview button at the very top of the screen, this is going to be a great long report because every single invoice is huge. So let's actually see if we don't kill the system trying to do that. There we go. So here's our 80-page report where we have the title, we have the invoice date, and the balance. We create a very easy report that shows that information for us there. I'm going to come back up here to the tabs at the top and go back to Report Designer. So let me run through this wizard again and choose some of the other options. I'm going to do a standard report. We got the title was one of them, invoice number, invoice date, and the balance. I'm going to go through these options, and this time I'm going to go to the tabular format, and I'm going to hit Finish. Now it changed the report layout, and instead of having each 4 of those pieces of data as a list, it now has them in different columns. So now when I hit Print Preview at the top, instead of 80 pages, I now have a 90-page report. So it gives us some basic ways through this just to create different layouts for you instead of having to start from a scratch or empty palette. Let's do this one more time. Invoice date, title, I don't know what field I was using, amount or balance. And we'll do the justified option. And you can see we're only doing 4 fields here, so it didn't worry about it too much, but it was able to fit all those pieces of data on one line, so we're okay there. I'll hit Print Preview, and there's our information. Now, once you have the Report Designer done with the wizard, you can come in here and make necessary modifications and changes in formats to your information. And I'll dig into this here in just a second because we'll start a report from scratch. So the Report Designer is a very, very easy way, the Report Wizard is a very easy way for you just to go through the options and create a very quick and easy report. I'm going to add one more grouping here. On this screen, I'm adding a grouping by title, which will allow us to group by the customer or by the customer name. So it'll give us a little bit of information in a little bit different format. So I'm going to undo that here just so you can see. I'm going to click the title right over here if I want to group it by the title. And if I hit by title, you can see here it added this title band. So under title, it'll display the invoice number, the invoice date, and the amount. So let's go through this again here. Now you can see now that I'm grouping, it gives me options on how we like to summarize that data. On an invoice date field, you probably wouldn't do a sum or any sort of information on that, but I'll use the amount fields, for example, here. I want to sum the total dollar amount of the invoices. I can also say, show me the averages, the minimum, the maximum, and the count. So let's do the option here to say, how many invoices do I have, and what is the total sum of those invoices? I'll hit Next, and now you see we have some additional layout options here. Do I want stepped? Do I want outline, outline 2? Do I want a line left 2? It looks like it's adding different lines and whatnot through the different layouts. So I'm just do this outline number 1 here. And let's go back to casual. I'll hit Finish. So now we see what it's done is got the title field, which is the name of the customer, and grouped it by the invoice number, invoice date, and amount. And then it has down here what is the sum and count for each one of those. So if I hit Print Preview, we can now see it's displayed the customer. It's actually not wrapping appropriately there, but I'll show you how we can fix that. Now we see 4 Albertsons. These are all of our invoices. And if I scroll down here at some spot, I should see the total sum and count of those invoices there. So a couple things I can do is we saw that that name Albertsons was wrapping. I can easily click on any one of these fields. I'm just going to click this right here. I'm going to drag it all the way to the right to give it as much room as possible. And maybe I'll make it a little bit less on its height. And I'll do the same thing with the title field right here. What I also can see here if I'm looking at this layout, I can see there's this big huge gap in between this invoice and the next invoice. If I come back to design mode, we can see that gap is this area right here, this detail band. This detail band is telling me that between the invoice number, date, and amount row, there's this big gap right here of extra space. So what I can do is I can just get the next band right here, this group footer, and click. I'm going to hold my mouse button right here until it becomes this little up-down with the bar arrow. So I'm just holding my left mouse button down. I'm going to drag it all the way up to right on top of the text. And the system is smart enough not to cover it up, so it'll just give it as much space as it needs at the bare minimum. So now if I hit print preview, now you can see my data is a little bit better and easier to see there. A couple other things I can clean up on this. If I went down to the bottom, you can see the sum and count information here was still not wrapping, or it is wrapping. Looks like just the default didn't make the fields big enough, so I'll just expand the fields here a little bit. And let's say I want to move that text a little bit closer over here. I'm just going to hold down my Shift key and select both of these records, or both of these labels, drag them all the way over here. Now I'll hit print preview, show my data, and you can see there's my information. Now it's done a couple different things here. We can see that our sum amount is a currency, and our count right here is, for some reason, it put that into a currency field also. You can change the formatting of all your different fields. With each of these different labels here, I can, for example, just click on the field here. Just like we had this little tick box right up here, right down here, when I click a field, I have this little tick box. So the same thing, I'll click like on title, and you can see this little tick box chevron thingamajigger shows up right there. I don't know what really to call that. I'm going to click this right here for this, and you can see I have a bunch of different options in terms of specifically what different tasks I can do against this label. Now one of them that I want to look at right here is this format string. There's a bunch of different coding you can do in terms of how to format that string. This little C2 right here indicates that it's a currency field up to 2 decimal places. I don't expect you to know that or remember that, so the easiest thing you can do is come right over here in this little 3 ellipses dot. You click this here, and you have the string editor to be able to figure out how do you want this number displayed. So I want it to be a number, and I want it just to be a number field, or I want it to be a number with 2 decimal places, or I want it to be a number with commas. You can see as I click on these different ones, it shows me different examples right here and how it's going to look. Okay? So I'm just going to do this number right here. I'll click OK. Now when I go back to my print preview, go look at this. Now I see it formatted in the way I want to. So going back into that, I can do that with any of the fields. I just click this little 3 ellipsis dot button right here on the format string, and I can do currencies, I can do numbers, I can do specials, I can do general, and you can customize it however you would like. One thing that I also notice on our layout here is this date field. Commonly in the database, we're actually storing the date and time, and we always generally in the ERP database store midnight. I want to get rid of that. That's not important. So I can do that same formatting on my invoice date field. So I'm going to click right here on my invoice date. One thing I'll sidetrack here is you can see on these different fields they have this little yellow or orange database icon. That means that this field is coming from the database, and that's the value. That's different than we see this invoice date field up here, which is just the label and is the heading. So if you were to come up here and try to change this as a date field, it's not going to do any good, because what you actually want to do is edit the detail row, the one that's actually pulling from the database. So hitting the little tick mark, clicking format string here, I'll go to date time. I have about 8 million date time options here. I'll pick one that I want. I'm just going to do month, day, year, and I'll click OK. I'll hit print preview, and now my data is formatted in a much easier way. Okay. So that's some of the basics that you can do with the layout there and the report wizard. So you can, it's very easy to start with the design mode and plug away from there. So I'm going to save this report. I'm going to do it demo invoices and call it wizard, just so we know, and I'll click OK. So if I close out of the report, I just lost my connection here, so I apologize. There we go. I close out of the report. I now see my new report right here, demo-invoices wizard, and it's there for my users to run. I can hit the little run button right here. I'm going to get my options, my different parameters that I have for that query. I want to run it for a specific customer. I can choose my different information here if I want to change the customer or run it for all customers. I'll click OK. And there's my report. Looks like I still have to make some fields a little bit bigger to wrap and deal with that. If I need to go in and edit and change the layout, I can just click the little pencil button again. It's going to ask me how do you want, what sort sample data do you want to use for designing the report, and here we are back into the design mode. I can fix my label field here. I'm really nitpicky when it comes to things aligning and all that kind of stuff, so I apologize. So now I'll start a report from scratch and do it a different way. So I'm going to click New Report here. I'm going to choose my same query. I'm going to do my same exact options here. And I'm at the blank slate. Now, we covered how to use the report wizard to design reports. I want to show you also how to design reports from scratch, because sometimes the design report or the report wizard doesn't give you exactly what you're looking for. It might give you a good basis and you can manipulate and change and move columns around from there, but to sometimes start with a base report, you'll see what is most comfortable for you. To either edit existing fields or drag fields and do whatever you want to there. So if I were to start from a blank slate here, what I want to grab is I want to grab those different fields and the different columns that I have returning on my query. To do that, I come over here to the section right here that says Field List. I'll click Field List, and I see my different data sets and my different results, really just the computer term for here's the different columns that you have available to you. So here's my different results that I have available, and then here's those same columns. So if I want to show my invoice number, I can just click this invoice number. I'm going to drag it right down over here into my detail band and drop it right there. So if I were to hit print preview, you now see I'm just getting a list of my invoice numbers. So I can get my invoice date, I can get my due date, I can get my balance, I can get my amount, all those fields, drag them right on there. So you can see we had our fun things happen by default that put the time against the dates, and then our currency fields here is up to 5 decimal places. So I'm going to go through and just fix a couple of those things. So as I showed you, I'm going to change the format string on this date field to be that option there. I'll do the same thing with this one. Change it to a date. I'll get my amount fields here, and I'll set those to currency values. And there's a default one there. And the same thing for this last one. So now print preview, it looks much better. Next thing I can do is I have standard options up here to align data, to change your colors, to change bolding, to change the alignment of the text on the field. Generally, when it's a financial field, the numbers you think about it, Excel, it always wants them right aligned. So I'm going to come back to design mode here. I'm going to get this field and tell it right here to align text to the right. Same thing for this one. I'll click print preview, and it's already looking better. Now what I'm not seeing on here is my customer, what customer it's for. What I can do is very easily, I can just come over here and get my title field and figure out where to put it. And you can see if I drop it here on the form, it's pink. That pink is an indication that it is overlapping another field. So you can tell, hey, data might be on top of something else. If I were to print preview now, you can see that, well, Cisco, so it actually didn't overlap that data. That was an easy one. I got lucky there. But if it was a longer customer name, it would probably overlap, or you would see if it was there. Your data is pretty funky and hard to read. Well, I can sit here and format all day long. Let's move these columns over. I get my title field. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger so it doesn't wrap. I know some of my customer names are a little bit longer. And I can see my data there. So you can keep dragging and dropping and moving fields around as many times as you need to. If any of you have experience with Crystal reports, the process is very similar with laying out the report. In this, I'm putting the customer name on every single line. Let's say I don't need it to display that on every single line. I just want that information grouped, and I want the system to group it just like we saw in our other example in the wizard. What I can do is hit this button right down here at the screen that says Add Group. So I'm going to hit Add Group and ask me what field do I want to group it by. So let's say I want to group it by the customer title. So you can see what it did here is it created a big white space area with a group header. If I were to run the report now, I'll have this, actually looks the same. I was expecting a big white empty area. I'm going to grab the group header right here of my customer name. I'm going to drag it to the top section, drag it right in here, print preview again, and now you see I have my customer here with that empty white space. Obviously it's smart enough if there's no data in there, don't even display it. So now I can make this section a little bit smaller. I might want to make this bold, and then I can get my different fields here. I'm just going to highlight all of them and drag them over a little bit. Maybe put my balance fields all the way to the very right. And now I have it grouped by Cisco. What you can also do if we look at the data is we can see that we have it grouped by Cisco, which does sorting by Cisco. So it's going to do sorting by the title there. But now let's say we want to sort the actual details. So we can see here this is dated 1/31 and then 9/30 in the year 20, and this is the year 2021. We want to sort it by that information. So just like down here where I had Add Group, I have a button next to it that says Add Sort. So if I hit Add Sort, now I want to do it by invoice date. So first it will group and sort it by the title, by the name of the customer in ascending order, and then it will sort by the invoice date in ascending order also. So now if I hit print preview, I should now see my data is sorted in that order. You can add multiple groups. So if I want to group by the title and then by invoice date, or another field, let's do, I guess let's just group by invoice date also. I'm going to get rid of this sort option here that I did. So group by title by invoice date. If I were to grab my invoice date here, move it up there, you'll see here's my different groups of information. Here's Cisco, all my invoices from 4/11, 5/16, 8/22, and so on. You can create as many hierarchies and levels of grouping on that you want to. So now let's say we want to add those subtotals. We want to see what my totals are by date. Subtotals you put in the group footer. This is the header that we have, the header of the title and the invoice date, but we need to have a footer at the end of the details that shows us, hey, I want to group up that information. Now when I added these groups right here, it automatically added, or when I added the groups down here, it automatically added these bands for the group header and the group header too. It didn't add a footer for me, but I can hit these check boxes right here to say add a footer. So you can see as soon as I check this box right here that says show footer, it created a new band right down here for me. I'll do that same thing for the invoice date. So it creates like kind of a grouped method here where you have your group header 1, then 2, your details, and then group footer 2, then 1. Because it creates that hierarchical method that says, hey, the group footer 2 is going to come before group footer 1 because in the order of operations there. So what I want to do, if I were to print it now, probably won't see any data, anything different. Nope. Is I want to group, or I want to sum up the total dollar amount of those invoices. So I'm going to grab that invoice amount field. I'm going to drag it into the group footer here. Now, if I just drag it into the group footer, it's not going to do anything different for me. You can see it just says $73. It's perfect for that one. It's perfect for this one because there's only one invoice in each one of those. But if I look at this next group down here, the 631.81, that just happens to be the invoice amount of the last one, but not the sum of all of those. So what I need to tell the system to do is to actually group that data. So once again, I'm going to click this little tick box here. And I have this option right here called Summary. So I'm going to click the ellipsis button next to Summary and ask you, what do you want to do? I want to get the amount. I want to sum the function. How do I want to sum it? Do I want to sum it by the group, the page, or the report? So I'm going to tell it I'm going to sum it by the group. So I'm just going to hit the group option, click OK. Now if I go to Print Preview, you should now see these still are the same, but now our totals for this date is now the sum of those 5 different invoices. So let me do that again with the balance field. So I'll grab the balance field. I'm just going to drag it right down here. Come over here to the summary field. I want to sum it by the group. And click OK. Print preview, we see our information. Just like we did the formatting on the fields up here to be proper currency, I can do that same thing on these fields here. I can do my format string. I want a currency. Click OK. Do that same thing on the balance field. Format string, currency, OK. I hit print preview. It's much prettier. I'll fix my alignment on both of these to align them to the right. I want them bold. Let's get rid of this little heading up here. Now I want to add the word total to the field, or a total display, or the words total. Over here we don't have anything like that. What we have over here is in this toolbox is a whole bunch of different options in terms of different fields and pieces of data you want to display. I want to add a label. That's what a label is these are just labels here with pieces of data associated with them. So if I get a label, I'm just going to drag it from here to right here, drop it where I want it to. I'm going to double click in it, and it's going to highlight that text and give it total. I might want to make it bold and align it to the right. Hit print preview. Now I'm slowly advancing my report. If we go over here to the very right, you have a whole bunch of different options with these different labels. If you want to add a border, for example, you want a border on the top of these, we can come to the borders, and I can say, you can see these little buttons over here. Do I want a border at the top, or I want to put a border around the whole thing? Maybe if I know how to click. There we go. Okay. Hit print preview, and now it put a border around the entire thing. What I don't have so far is I did the totals for that group for this one individual invoice, but if I come down here to the bottom, I don't see totals by this customer. So far, all I have is totals by this individual date. So I'm going to do that same thing like I did here with the group footer. I could very easily come up here and drag the amount fields down, but because I did that logic already, I'm just going to highlight all three of these, and I'm going to right-click and do a copy. And I'm going to click down here in this group footer, right-click again, and do a paste. So now I've pasted those values, or those settings, down into the group footer. I'm going to hit print preview. Now if I come down to the very end of my report, you can see I have my totals there. Sometimes you might want to display the customer name on that total line. I can grab the title of it right down here, so I can easily see. Come to the end of the report. Now I see Cisco total. Now you probably want to do a little bit of formatting, cleanup, and deal with wrapping if your numbers are too big. Some things that's easy is I'm just going to highlight everything and change my font size. Now some people get mad at the font size going too small because they're not able to see, but I have laser eyes, so it's always easy for me. So there we go. Now we don't have wrapping issues anymore, and you can go from there. I can clean up my formatting, do whatever I need to. We have a bunch of other fields over here. We have your checkbox, you have rich text box, you have picture boxes, a table, lines. If you want to add lines, we can add a line field here. I can just make a line. Let's do it in the group footer right after the customer, for example. If you want to do any sort of breaking and visual representation of your next group of data, now we've added a line after that customer. You can do that. The checkbox options are generally used for something that is a yes or no. So if you returned, let's say one of our fields over here was a is it fully paid option. We have fields in the database that generally represent that. They usually say the word is at the beginning. If it says is at the beginning, then you can return that and use a checkbox for it. Same logic works. I can just drag it anywhere down into wherever I want to, and I tell it what, I can tell it right here what field that relates to. So you can see the results option over here is the same information over here. I don't have anything in this little data set, so it's a bad example to give you there. If you want to print a barcode, you can drag a barcode onto the field, and you can do the same thing. Hit this little box. I'm going to tell it what piece of data I want it to go off of. Let's say I want it to be, I want to barcode the invoice number. I can do that. Okay. I'm actually going to drag that into the details right here first instead of the footer. And if I hit print preview, it's complaining probably because it's a text field going into that. You have all kinds of different symbology fields here. If you're doing barcoding, you will have a lot of fun playing with that. Reach out to me if you're going to do that, and I can help you set up the barcoding. You do have page info. It's a very heavily used one right down here. These options right here are page infos. So I can drag a page info right down here to the very bottom. And if I click this down right here, I have page information. What different pages, what do I want to see? The username, the current date, time, the page number, total number of pages, etc. Okay. You can do formatting, same and different thing if you want to just change your display of that. So that is a high-level overview. As I said, this is a much faster session of being able to create groups, be able to show your details, how to add totals, We have our different group footers. I can save this report. This is my demo invoices, non-wizard. I will close out of this report, and now I have the option available to me here. Somebody can come in later, run this. Let's say give it to me for all customers. And now here we have Albertsons. Here's all my invoices by date, subtotal displayed. Somewhere down here I should have, have my Albertsons total line, and then grouping over to my next customer. On the report viewer here, it's the same report viewer, just it looks like it has ribbon buttons or bigger buttons than actually within ERP. For those of you that are familiar with ERP, they do all the same different things to export, to email it, you name it. You have all those options here to print and quick print and change your margins and whatnot if you need to there. We showed last week or 2 weeks ago how you can publish a query to ERP, so it's added to the ERP menu structure. What you do is you just right-click and do Publish to ERP, so that adds in there. Same thing for reports. I can click on a report, right-click, and do Publish to ERP, and that will send it up there so that it can be integrated into your ERP menu structure. Then whoever has access in your company to add user security permissions can give everybody access to that directly from their ERP menu structure. That's the overview that I have, or not the overview, but that's how to create different reports within Aeros Vision. So if there's any questions, I will come up here to the chat section to see if there's anything up there. I don't see anything up there in that section. Let me check the QA panel. I see some people saying duh because I explained something after they asked the question, so we're good there. If there's any other questions, I'll hang on here for a little bit. But for the most part, that's what I have of actually creating reports. Thank you, everybody, for your time.